Mr. President, I want to join the Republican leader as well as the Democratic leader with our hopes that we can still rescue the situation on Capitol Hill before the deadline. We have an impending government shutdown that's only 5 days away. The House Republicans on the other side of the rotunda have not taken on their responsibility at this moment, and we are doing our best on a bipartisan basis to do the opposite. Extreme factions of the Republican Party continue to list their demands for reckless cuts and partisan proposals in exchange for keeping the lights on the federal government. In doing so, their radical agenda is holding the livelihood of the American people and the proper functioning of our government hostage. House Republican proposals, which some of their own members don't even agree with, would cut millions of dollars from public health, child care, education, food safety, law enforcement, housing, and more. These cuts would create uncertainty for hardworking families across the country, and they'd put our national security and economic well-being at risk. Instead of negotiating in good faith, House Republicans are willing to put the country through the pain of a shutdown. Now, we've had shutdowns before. I remember them well. 2013, 2018, and now the threat of one in 2023. It appears to be a 5-year cycle. The shutdowns in 2013 and 2018 reduced economic output and GDP growth by projections in the billions. They forced federal employees to go without checks, to either work without pay or to be furloughed. And that included our military at the time. Service members would not be paid until Congress funded the government. That would mean missed paychecks and strained household budgets for the duration of a shutdown until extreme MAGA Republicans felt their demands had been met. Take one agency, for example, the National Institutes of Health, the premier medical research agency in the world. They would have to delay new clinical trials during a government shutdown, stalling critical medical research for diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's. A shutdown would halt training of 2,600 air traffic controllers at a time when our country desperately needs them. And the air traffic controllers already on the job would have to work without pay. How would you like to have the pressure of that job and in the back of your mind wonder if you were able to make your mortgage payment? That would potentially lead to delays, longer wait times for those traveling, as we've seen in past shutdowns. The same goes for TSA. A shutdown would delay major infrastructure projects that were created by the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It could jeopardize the benefits of more than 6 million American participants in the Special Supplement Nutrition Program for women, children, and infants, including 170,000 in my home state of Illinois. Public housing operations and housing choice vouchers subsidies would be at risk of running out of funding. And a shutdown could deplete relief funds and slow emergency responses in the case of natural disasters, and we've seen evidence of plenty of those. In short, it would be nothing less than a disaster for the economy and for American families for this handful of MAGA Republicans to stop the funding of our government. Here in the Senate, we've taken a bipartisan approach to the task of keeping our government funded. Mr. President, I've served on the Senate Appropriation Committee for a number of years, and I've watched carefully as the procedure of that committee, one of the most important committees in the Senate, has changed. For the last almost 5 years, we have gone without a meaningful bipartisan effort to write budget bills. And we've taken from the members the opportunity on the floor of the Senate to actually review those bills and make amendments. Our good fortune, the leaders in that Senate Appropriations Committee currently are two of the best. One of the best Democratic senators, legislators, Patty Murray of Washington, chairs the Appropriation Committee. Her ranking Republican member, Susan Collins of Maine, another extraordinary legislator. What they've managed to achieve so far in the Appropriations Committee is a tribute not only to their skill, but also a tribute to bipartisanship. They have reported out all 12 appropriation bills to the floor of the United States Senate for consideration on the floor for the first time in 5 years. Instead of a massive package called an omnibus, they were leading us toward individual appropriation bills, an amendment process on the floor we haven't seen for a long, long time. Unfortunately, it was set aside by one Republican member last week, but we haven't given up on the notion of making this bipartisan. I heard earlier a statement made from the Democratic leader in the Senate that there have been negotiations through the weekend for a temporary spending bill. I hope that that spirit continues when it comes to the appropriation bills. And I'm sure with Senators Murray and Collins working on it, we have a good possibility. Now we recognize more than ever before the need to keep the lights on in Washington on Capitol Hill. This week is going to be our test. What must be top of mind in any compromise is keeping the federal employees paid, their families fed, keep the economy moving forward, keep out our affairs in order so that our adversaries know that the United States of America can actually fund its own government. That's why here in the Senate, we're going to consider a bipartisan continuing resolution to keep the government open at current funding levels while we work toward a longer-term answer. Instead of considering a similar serious short-term proposal to prevent a shutdown, some House Republicans are now trying to consider 11 individual appropriation bills before Sunday. Let me tell you, their track record doesn't look so good. Speaker McCarthy has already pulled down more than one vote on the defense spending bill, despite the fact that his own party actually drafted the bill. They drafted the bill and then they couldn't pass it with their own members of the House. I'm not sure what his plan is, but in the Senate, ours is to prevent a government shutdown and have an orderly process of spending bills considered by the Senate. We owe it to every American family to do our jobs and do it in a timely, respectful manner. I urge my colleagues in the House to put the needs, well-being, and livelihood of Americans above any partisan loyalty. I'm committed to working with my colleagues to prevent a shutdown, and I look forward to the Senate considering a continuing resolution that does just that.